Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Especially those of you who are visiting with us. We're so thankful for your presence this morning. We want to make you aware that this 9:30 Bible study period, we are in a study of 1 Peter, the letter of 1 Peter. And this morning we're going to be looking at chapter 3. If you want to be opening your Bibles to that text, we'll be there shortly. Want to make you aware that in our syllabus, we're kind of like right in the middle of this study. We're at the second part of our service acrostic chain, where we're going to be looking at our service, or as Peter would say, our submission in our intimate relationships. And that'll be chapter 3, 1 all the way through verse 12, where 8 through 12 will be a summary over this whole entire link on our service, where it began with human authorities. So as it is our custom here with this particular class, we have a goal. It's one of our class objectives, and that is to read through 1 Peter as much as we can. And so I'll just ask a show of hands, because we're keeping track of our progress here. How many read it one time? How many read it twice? Okay. 3 times? Four times. All right, got some troopers here. 1, 2. Who else? Anyone else? 4? How about 5 times? All right, 1. Who read it more than 5? Just show me your hand, okay? How many? 7. All right. Always can count on Kay. Anyone read it more than 5 times? Okay. That's all right. We've had a Christmas break, so we've got a lot out. So we'll probably see a little dip in our goal thing here. But what we did last week is we had 19 participants with nearly 58 that got us just over 350 readings. And I know at the very beginning I said a very modest goal of 150. I apologize for that. I should have thought much higher of you guys. But let's see if we can hit that 500 mark by the end of this study. Okay, so I presented this lesson with an acrostic outline. I think this is what Peter is doing to a degree. And the acrostic just simply means that every word begins with the same letter. In this case, we have salvation, sanctification, service, suffering, and security. And we've already looked at our salvation, which is founded in a new birth. And so this is something God has done through His great mercy, through His infinite plan from the very beginning of time. He was going to bring about our regeneration, in which there would be this new birth. And that birth would lead into our sanctification. And this is where we take on a new identity. And a lot of that identity is going to be in the form of the relationship of a child with his father. And so we're obedient children, is what Peter will say. And that obedience really is what leads us to Christ as that chief cornerstone. And so that stone that we come to actually becomes something of great worth, of great value to us. And so it's precious to us. And because we come to Him, it provides a sense of belonging, a sense of identity. And that's where we get we're able to understand what our meaning and our purpose in life is, because God has given us a new one. But then this leads us to our service, which creates this new posture. And this is where we began to see how this new posture shows itself in the face of suffering. in the face of the different relationships we find ourselves in which things aren't going to go as well as we think, being these new sanctified living stones that are now being built into this spiritual house. There's going to end up requiring of us to take on a new posture. And that posture is going to be centered on the idea of honor. Where in the Old Testament, when we saw the great fall, shame entered the world. And the way that Peter is going to answer that shame is he's going to present this idea of honor. Honor is the antithesis of shame. And so we're going to submit ourselves showing honor to everyone. And he's going to go through and show us all these different ways in which we can actually do that. And this is a spiritual warfare. The world is not going to be excited about this new relationship that you have. And so it's going to create some tension. It's going to create some conflict by being in this new relationship. And that's partly because we've been assigned into a priesthood. And so because of God wanting us to be holy, He's wanting us to carry out that holiness through priestly service. And so we are going to declare the praises of Him who called us out of darkness and into His marvelous light. We're going to be the ones who offer up spiritual sacrifices. And those sacrifices are not going to be something simple. It's not something I pull out of my wallet out of convenience. This is going to cause pain. It's going to cause discomfort. That's why they're sacrifices. He's going to then give us this divine posture that ultimately the reason why we behave the way we do is that we're modeling our lives after the living stone, the cornerstone. We're modeling our lives after Christ. And because He has shown us that way of honor in the way that He conducted His life, being that ultimate sacrifice, because His suffering was to produce an outcome, our healing. What is our suffering supposed to produce? The healing of others. That's our end game here when we consider what our purpose is in our holy service. Here was our transitional verse, and in verse 12 he says, live such good lives among the pagans. That's the NIV. But we actually see this used in other ways where he's actually using the idea of honor, showing honor. And what does that really mean when I am supposed to show this honor? And so we'll break this down. Last week when we looked at human authorities and slaves in chapter 2, 11 through 25, this was going to be my closing slide of last week. We didn't make it. But this is a chiasm. Peter is using a very sophisticated yet eloquent form of literary structure to help us read between the lines, as it were. And so what we see at the very beginning, we see this identity as exiles up here at 2:11. But yet at the very end of the chapter, he's going to reframe our identity by saying that we're sheep of a different pasture. That's why we're foreigners. That's why we're exiles. We're not in the pasture of the world. We're now in this new pasture in which our shepherd and overseer is Christ. Notice here he says honorable conduct among the nations. And yet what is Christ's example? Christ's good, what was his good deed? What was the honorable conduct that he performed for us? He bore our sins, is what Peter is telling us. Notice submission to human authorities is what he calls us to do. And yet what do we learn later on? Christ actually submitted to this unjust human authority, didn't he? He gave his life to that human authority when they crucified him on the cross. And then here, the last point before he gets to the center idea, it was God's will that in doing good, we would silence the ignorance of foolish talk. That's one of the side effects of our honorable, chaste conduct. the character of Christ. Because this is not just God's will, but it's favor with God that even slaves will suffer under harsh treatment while doing good. And this brings us to the center point of what a chiasm does, is it's drawing our focus and our attention to the main idea of what Peter's communicating. And that is, we honor everyone. He is countering these shame cycles, this shame cycling that occurs in our daily lives. Because when we choose not to embrace the living stone, we're not choosing to embrace the character of that chief cornerstone, we are going to fall victim and prey to these shame cycles. And we're going to look at that near the end of this study. And so this just shows us this big idea of how honor is so important. Now, we looked at this last week, comparing the idea of covenantal holiness, process-based holiness, which is what Peter is teaching, versus a performance-based holiness that we can fall victim to, we can fall prey to, as the devil is seeking to devour. And so here's some things that were highlighted in this. When we're in a process-based holiness, we're law-abiding citizens. Even when it puts us in a deficit, we are going to be citizens who obey the law. This allows God to work through us in a way that is beyond our knowledge. By showing honor, constructs bridges of trust and personal character, not through political allegiances. And so the way that I'm going to influence and affect others is they're not going to look at the fact that I'm a Democrat or a Republican. What's going to influence them is they're going to say, hey, that guy may have a political affiliation, but I can see what his primary affiliation is to the shepherd and overseer of his soul, that Christ is supreme in his life. Holiness, which is our covenant relations, is more obvious when under distress, when we accept unjust penalty patiently. And this is where our behavior becomes more obvious to the world. My holiness is going to be seen more clear through this refining process that I endure through suffering. Seeing misalignment as opportunities for showing honor, even when it's seen like losing. And we don't like to lose. And when we feel like losing, we feel like we're being taken advantage of. And so we want to jump in there and do something about that. And yet we're going to find out that's not really the way that we approach it. We move toward those that need to align with our worldview. I may have that backwards. That may be on the other one. Okay, so here's the other one. Here's the opposite idea. This is the dangerous idea. And so if I embrace performance-based holiness, what I'm going to do, I'm going to resist laws or leaders that oppose my religious convictions. I'm going to have apathy or even contempt toward political opposition. Even if those believers, my fellow brethren, support that opposition. And so I'm going to take that contempt and I'm going to put it on my brothers and sisters. Like, how in the world can you believe this? Or how in the world could you vote for that guy or that woman? And so I'm going to move to where I'm going to create these distinctions, these hierarchies because of these political opinions or positions. Politics is exempt from abstaining from sinful desires. And so when he says, rid yourself of all sinful desires, quickly my mind may go, well, he's talking about sexual things. No, that's not the context here. He's talking about the context of suffering and what happens when we are being placed in a deficit, when we feel like losing, we're coming out fighting. And so he's going to talk about malice and deceit and hypocrisy and slander of every kind. And he's going to say, rid yourself of those things. Because that's what we employ when we find ourselves in a transactional relationship with God and with each other. Treat submission as optional when authority is unbiblical. And so we'll be really quick that, if it even has the appearance of disagreeing with the Bible, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to have anything to do with that. Move to isolate from impact of local government or culture toward those that align with our worldview. And I think what I meant to say here, this is worded not right, we move toward those that need to align with our worldview. And so when he says live among the pagans, he doesn't say as a Christian you go live in an isolated community where you all believe the same thing. No, you live among the very hostility that's around you so that you can display this holiness that people can find healing through you. So we also looked at slaves and masters. And I added financial institutions to this to see maybe the contemporary relevance here. So under this process-based holiness, we're going to treat instances of mistreatment as opportunities to acknowledge the pain of others and provide healing. And this is mean I'm redirecting my attention from myself and my personal suffering. And I'm seeing how through that suffering, I'm able to provide healing for others. You see, Jesus bore our sins that we might heal. He suffered so that we could be healed from that. And that should be our motivation, even under harsh treatment. Ethical behavior paves the way for truth to overcome religious confusion. Being free from debt creates numerous possibilities for generosity. That's that showing honor to our mother and our father that Jesus talked about. Holiness requires directing attention upward and outward. Enduring loss now shapes our perspective toward greater and measurable rewards in the future. And so here's how this is countered. We might take legal action in pursuit of punitive measures. We're going to HR, aren't we? We're being mistreated. We're going to HR. We're going to deal with this. I'm going to go get an attorney. I'm going to fight this because I'm going to win. It's in my favor. I'm going to respond with passive-aggressive behavior such as quiet quitting. And so if I'm working for a harsh boss, I'm just going to do the bare minimum. I'm not going to excel at my work. I'm just going to do the bare minimum to get my time in so I can get paid. Getting justice through shaming tactics that undermine abusers' reputation. This represents a form of victory. And so I may wait for my nemesis to make a mistake. And as soon as they make a mistake, I'm pounding on it. I'm taking every advantage to bring this person down. Because ultimately, that's going to elevate me, right? I'm going to look good now. I'm going to look vindicated by this happening. And I'm going to rejoice in that. Shame on us if we think that way. Let debts default if you believe the associated fees and interest are unfair. And so we're being taught, debt doesn't matter. I'm not obligated to pay this debt. And so I can let it go into default. I can file bankruptcy, wipe it out. I don't have to worry about those things. And that's really not the way we ought to approach debts. We need to show honor to these financial institutions that have given us these funds to work with based on the fact that they believe you're honorable. That's why they loan you the money. They think you're an honorable person and they're going to pay it back. Christians need to be honorable people. Shame cycling accepts benevolence with contempt instead of gratitude. And I've experienced this myself, even among brethren. Matter of fact, this is where I see it the most, is among brethren. You go in to help them out, and then you're working through the process, and before it's all over, they're more angry at you than they are with their own problems. And it's now all your fault, even though you're there trying to help them out. Okay, and so this is going to bring us to today, where we're going to look at husbands and wives. And so when we look at the text, I've chosen the literary standard version. This is like almost a literal Greek translation, and I've chosen this for this morning. And so if you look at our outline, it kind of looks like this. submission to disobedient husbands, submission to wives. That's implicit, not explicit. And submission in summary, 8 through 12. So I'm going to read this just for sake of recording, so this can be heard. So chapter 3, verse 1 begins, "Wives, be subject to your own husbands in like manner, that even if some are disobedient to the word, they may be won through the behavior of the wives without the word. Having beheld your pure behavior in fear, whose adorning, let it not be that which is outward, of braiding of hair, of putting around the things of gold, or putting on of garments, but the hidden man of the heart, by the incorruptible thing of the meek and quiet spirit, which is of great value before God. For thus once also the holy women who hoped on God were adorning themselves, being subject to their own husbands. As Sarah was obedient to Abraham, calling him Lord, of whom you became daughters, doing good and not fearing any terror. Husbands, in like manner, dwelling with them according to knowledge, as to a weaker vessel, to the wife, imparting honor, as also being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers are not hindered." So let's look at this question here. What is the end game for a wife to be submissive to a disobedient husband? Explain. What does the text say? Yeah, what does the text say? What is she doing? What is she trying to do? How's it worded? How's it worded in the text? Win. We're winning him. We're so desperate for him to be a Christian. Now, I think this has more implications than just his conversion, because it may include a Christian husband who's disobedient. He's not fulfilling his duties like he's supposed to. How does a Christian wife who has a man who professes to be godly and yet is ungodly at home, how does she deal with that? She's going to win him. She's going to win him without a word. And so we see that. If some are disobedient to the word, they may be won. What adorning should her disobedient husband see? What's the text say? Yeah, so Rob is saying inward, this inward person of the heart. Anybody have anything else? What?
Quiet, gentle spirit.
Quiet, gentle spirit. Very good. You see anything else? I heard something. What? Her submission to him. Yeah, very good. Very good. Yeah, okay. So her adorning is going to look something like this. Yeah, through her behavior, without a word, she's going to have pure behavior. This is actually can be translated showing honor. We're going to see that here in a minute. So through her conversation, King James Version, because remember, behavior is a language. Our behavior communicates. And so the way that I put on this pure behavior, they're going to behold that. And they're going to see this reverence where they're showing their husband they can surrender and not have to be in control. Because when a wife naturally, when she finds herself in a deficit with her husband, naturally, she's going to grab the wheel. That's the fall. Her desire is for her husband. She is going to take control if she's not seeing things the way they ought to be seen. She's going to grab a hold of this wheel. She's going to take control. And yet, she's not going to do that. She's not going to take that action. She's going to surrender and trust God in her reverent behavior. And so she's going to show this hidden person of the heart, not an external so much as here he's going to see what's actually inside of her, what makes up her being. And so we have this incorruptible thing of a meek and quiet spirit, which is our value language we talked about at the very beginning of class earlier in the back like lesson 1, I think. But where we look at this fact that this meek and quiet spirit is actually very precious to God. This is something that we have to nurture within ourselves, is this inner person. Incorruptible attraction of a self-controlled spirit. And when I have faith, I don't have terror. I'm not going to be afraid. And so my goal, again, my end game is to win him. And to win him means I'm pursuing peace in this tension and conflict that's there. And so he's going to see that I hope in God and that I trust in God, because I'm not going to allow fear and terrors to overcome me, because I'm going to be grounded in hope in God. So my trust is going to be in his covenantal faithfulness, and by showing honor actually is going to strengthen my position, not weaken it.
When you're going through this and you're talking about the wife's relationship, it always takes me back to Proverbs 31, beginning of verse 10, when it says, "An excellent wife who can find, she is far more precious than jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, he will have no lack of gain." And then it goes to what we're saying. He does him good and not harm all the days of her life. And so this woman is seeking to do his good, just like you're saying, doing good and treating her husband right. For all the days of her life. But this picture you see, at least to me, is that her husband trusts in her because of the way that she lives and conducts her life.
Right. And so Proverbs 31 presents the ideal. And so if we had a bar to measure to, that's what we measure to. And we see Peter here, the bar is way down, isn't it? He's not what he's supposed to be. And how can she be the woman of Proverbs, and yet her husband does not react that way? Because there's no guarantee your godliness is going to produce winning him over. And that's why we have to trust in God and his covenant faithfulness. Because even in the end, he doesn't become what you expect. You still hold true to that inner person, to what you are, because you belong to the chief cornerstone. Your identity is not in him. Your identity is in the cornerstone. That is the first and primary thing, because if I am grounded on him, then there's no relationship that can shake me. Even my own spouse, which is the most intimate of all our human relationships. Let's go further here. What adorning does Peter discourage?
Outward.
Yeah, so outward. We see the inward and we see the outward. And what specifics does he kind of mention here? Yeah, he's mentioning jewelry and what else? Yeah, braiding of the hair. What else? There's one more thing. What? Garments. Huh? What is this? What is this? Braiding of hair, putting around the things of gold. Is he presenting a dress code here? Women, you have to be this way. And yet we see even today amongst religious communities that have embraced this in a literal sense. No braiding of, no doing anything of your hair. Maybe combing, I guess. No makeup, no jewelry. And you wear just almost like sackcloth and ashes almost. I mean, bless these women's hearts that have gotten caught up into this. Is Peter talking about a dress code? What is the context of this passage? What is the context? What is the end game of her action? What are we talking about? What's her end game here? To win her husband. To win him. What could braiding of hair, clothing, and jewelry do for her? Because she's trying to win her husband. What do those things do for her? Ladies, what do you do? What did you do before you went on a date? What did you do? You look good. You put the work in. You show this guy. Look at me. And guess what? He sees you, and his eyes are like this big. You know, kind of like when Adam saw the woman for the first time. Whoa, man. You know, big eyes. Beautiful. What could she do to win her husband? She could use an external way of doing it. She could manipulate him and control him. And this is part of what's dysfunctional in most marriages, is that when the man's not living up to what he ought to be, and shame on us when we're that way, when I'm that way. And what she may feel compelled to do is to use her beauty as an advantage. And we think about how beautiful Sarah was. She's mentioned in this text. You know how beautiful Sarah was? I don't know. I didn't see a picture of her. I haven't found one of those yet. But do you realize every world power, every one of the most powerful men in the world wanted her? Abimelech wanted her. Pharaoh wanted her because she was a knockout. She could have used that to her advantage to control and manipulate Abraham. But Peter says, no, she called him Lord because she showed him honor. And could she have used external ways? And it's not just braiding of hair or makeup or clothing. It could be my intelligence. It could be the fact that I've got more degrees than you have. It may be that I make more money than you make. And so I can use employ different things to manipulate and control my husband to get the outcomes I'm searching for. And Peter is saying, no. That's not how this works. That's how the world works. That's maybe how you used to do it. But God has brought you into a new birth, into a living hope. You've come to the chief cornerstone. You're going to behave differently. And your holy service is going to look like one who displays this hidden person of the heart. How are husbands to act in like manner when the instructions are nothing like the wives? How's that possible? Notice what he's asked to do doesn't sound like anything like her, and yet he says in like manner. Why is that?
Because it involves humility and submission, primarily to God.
Yeah, that's the key, isn't it? That's the key.
It doesn't have to be the same things, it's the same attitudes.
Correct. Yeah, very good, Mike. And this, again, falls back to what it means to show honor. When if there's a person in front of me, and this is just what they are, in all their flaws and in who they are, if I posture myself where I lower myself in front of them, I am showing honor. It's not that they're higher. They've been lifted up. They're better. They're not better. I've lowered myself to them. Lowered below them because I'm showing them preference. I'm showing them honor. And that's what he's calling the wife and the husband to do here. And that's why it's in like manner, because did Jesus do that? Absolutely, he did that. He emptied himself, right? Philippians 2. He emptied himself, came down, became flesh, dwelt among us. And yet, what did he do? What was his posture? His posture was to the cross so that we we could be elevated with honor from God. And so husbands, in like manner, we see him imparting honor. And this honor is similar to what the women are instructed when they're to have this chaste conduct. The contemporary English version puts it this way: because he will see how you honor God, is what is at play here. This idea of honor. And so 2:21, Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example. What was his example? His example was he bore our sins in his body. By his wounds you have been healed. That is the end game. And the end game for the wife or the husband is to win them. Not win them so that they're under my feet and I'm looking down at them, but I'm winning them the way God wants me to win them. And so I'm going to show honor toward my wife when she isn't what she's supposed to be. The natural order for me is to dominate her, to control her, because I can do that. And yet he's going to say, no, you're going to show her honor, and you're going to resist. Okay. So let's go back to creation for just a moment. Let's look at this. Some of you have seen this before. So here's man. God creates man in his image, and he's going to give him responsibility. He's going to the earth. He's going to subdue and have dominion, and this is going to have all types of implications as to what he's going to accomplish under this divine mandate. And yet through this process, God's going to teach him some valuable lessons. And he's going to help him work through naming the animals. So you can see he's learning science here. But through that process, he's teaching him loneliness. And so he's going to experience this evil, this loneliness. And God's going to produce a woman for him from his own flesh. And he's going to call her woman. That's her name. He's going to call her woman. And that's because she is the most suitable companion for him. And they're going to be in this one flesh relationship, this oneness. And this is how we can better understand the oneness of God, yet three persons. There's this oneness. And here God is giving us a glimpse of that oneness by saying, here are two, and yet they're one. There's two, and yet there's one. And this is the beautiful, harmonious relationship in creation that God designed. And he gave her roles. She's going to bear children and be fruitful. And this, again, is going to have all these implications of what she's going to do to fulfill her part. And this is really going to result in a co-regency, this royal priesthood that they're going to have as they stand before creation, revealing the image of God in themselves. And so when the world needs to see God, they're going to see it in them. And so Psalms 8 point this out. You have made them a little lower than the angels and crowned them with glory and honor. You made them rulers over the works of your hands and put everything under their feet. That was the original order. But man corrupted that original order in Psalm 8. And so what happens, before I get to that, I'm a little ahead of myself. So under this creation order, there is relationship. And this really means covenant. When we talk about relationship, we're talking about covenant. To God, we're made in his image, we have fellowship with him, and we're entrusted with divine mandates. This is our relationship to our Creator. Now, to nature, he's to have dominion, subdue, and to bear God's image to this creation. To woman, it's a relational covenant wholeness. He's now whole. He's now complete. He doesn't feel that sense of emptiness that he had before when he could not find any suitable helper among the animals. And so here that's been made complete. There's honor and they're not unashamed. To himself, he's guiltless, his desires are governed, and his purpose, his end game, is centered in service. Now, here comes the fall. So, there's disobedience. Man ends up with toil. Woman ends up with pain. The woman is going to have this desire for her husband, and this really means that she's going to desire to control him, is what this means. Because this is in the context of judgment. God is giving them over to their passions. He's giving them over to their desires that the serpent had tempted them with. And so her desire is going to be for him, and yet how's he going to counter that? Well, I'm going to show you. I'm going to rule over you. I'm going to make sure you can't grab the wheel. And so I'm going to rule over you. So the relationship changes. There's now shame. Man is sinful. Even though the covenant is intact, fellowship with God is diminished. To nature, he's vulnerable to it. There's toil, there's thorns, suffering, disorder, and death. To the woman, now, instead of there being one, now there are two. There's a distinction now, right? Because he's going to name her Eve right after this. He makes distinctions. And so there's shame, there's blame, there's roles being challenged, and there's relational insecurity. And then self, uncertainty, undirected passions, and purpose-centered is now no longer in service, but actually to self. And so what this does, here's how Peter solves this problem. He's going to say, woman, you honor the man. You're going to submit with chaste conduct, and you're going to show him honor. That's how we're going to correct this broken cycle. And the husband is going to honor the wife by dwelling according to knowledge. This is Peter's solution, and I think he's calling back to this age-old problem of shame cycling in which he's going to correct this. And we'll see it this way. And so we have shame. And so our identity is challenged. We have wounded self-image, exposure seeks to cover. We may pursue isolation, emotional withdrawal. And yet this is going to lead to blame. We're going to redirect our identity, avoid accountability, anxiety-driven control, self-justification narratives. We're going to be making excuses and seeking external villains. We're going to see God as transactional. We're going to have a heightened sensitivity to judgment. And yet that blame is going to lead to fame, which is going to restructure our identity, which challenges motives, creates scale-based metrics. That's that love bombing you'll hear therapists talk about. Competitive hierarchies, formulate comparisons, moral posturing, surface conformity. And then that's going to lead and continue the cycle of shame, because we're going to deconstruct as we shame others for our own benefit. And that's the result of the fall. And yet, what does Peter do? Peter's replacing that broken cycle. And he's going to replace it with a new cycle that starts with honor, blessing, and service. This is how he's going to correct it in his letter. And so we'll see that when he's grounding our identity in the new birth. Our faith is tested. And that's where we're honored at the appearing of Jesus. God honors what the world shames, is what he says in 2:4. And so we firm up our identity with a new purpose as living stones, a new focus, being alert and sober-minded. We imitate Christ, not returning in kind, but returning with blessing. We keep our tongue from evil. Love covers a multitude of sins. We turn slander into testimony, which then leads to displaying our identity. Honorable living can lead to winning. Not for selfish gains, but for the hope that we heal others, that we lead others to conversion. Showing honor promotes the image of others over self. Humility allows God to work in and through us. Influence without the need to manipulate. And that's what he calls us to do. And so we're rooted in relationship with God and mutual identity as co-heirs of grace. Submission is missional, rooted in God's covenant desire to redeem. Showing honor to others is only possible when we first seek to honor God. Holiness is rooted in hope in God and not in the spouse's behavior. Sarah's obedience is framed as doing good without terror. Here's the opposite of that. We can be rooted in negotiated duties, rights, or social contract between spouses. Our submission becomes a duty performed to keep peace or avoid conflict. Honoring others is only possible when expectations have been amply met. Holiness is rooted in maintaining the marriage contract. You do your job, I'll do my job, and this works out. Obedience becomes compliance driven by anxiety and fear of failure. And I appreciate your patience allowing me to fly through all that. And thank you for your attention and your participation.